What's happening, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking all about the 7T to... My phone's ringing again. Chris speaking. Oh, I just bought myself a hard lid for my Ford Ranger. What's happening, guys? Welcome back to today's review. I'm Chris, and today we're talking all about the Tamron 7T to 180 2.8 lens. Tamron have kindly sent this over to me to use for the last few weeks, and I've really been enjoying it. I've taken a few photos with it, tested out video capabilities, compared it a little bit with the 70 to 200 G Master, but I'm going to do a separate video comparing those two directly because that's going to require something a little bit more specific. Today I'm really just talking about the Tamron itself and giving you my thoughts on it. Before we get into it, I'd tell you straight off the bat, it's definitely a great lens and I definitely recommend buying it. There's a couple of things I'm not a huge fan of, but we'll talk about those first and then we'll go into some sample pictures. Before we carry on as well, I just want to let you guys know, if you've been following along my channel for a while, you probably know that I was a Sony advocate for I don't know, about a year previous, and I guess I can tell you guys now I've left the program. Nothing against Sony, I'm still shooting Sony cameras. It just wasn't really doing it for me, and I didn't really have the time to do the things that they needed me to do. And I feel like it's a little bit more credible for my YouTube channel if I'm not sponsored by any companies at all, so I want to keep it like that. I've always been honest in the past, maybe a little bit too honest for Sony sometimes, but yeah, for now I'm not sponsored by Sony at all anymore. And I think it's a good move going forward for my YouTube channel. So with that said, let's jump straight into it. Now, straight off the bat, the things I don't really like is the lack of function buttons and switches on the lens. I talk about this a lot with the other Tamron lenses I've reviewed and a few other lenses you can get. But my Sony G Master lenses have the function button and the AF/MF switch on the lens bodies, which is a really nice thing to have because I use that AF/MF switch quite a lot. And I do often use the function button if I'm using like focus hold or something during video. But it's just a really nice thing to have, especially the AF/MF switch. I'd really like that. It's quite a pain in the Sonys, the way I have it set up anyway, to go into the function menu and change it from manual focus to autofocus. I could program it to another button, but I have it all set up on other functions that are more important to me. So it's just something to note. It's not a deal breaker at all. It just requires an extra step to change it into manual focus. A lot of people aren't going to be doing that anyway, but I just thought I would let you guys know. The next thing I noticed that I wasn't a massive fan of, and most of the other lenses I review don't have this either, but the Tamron 70 to 180 doesn't have image stabilization in the lens. It's not usually a problem because the Sony cameras are obviously sensor stabilized, and to be honest, it works fine. If you'd never used the 70 to 200 G Master, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference, and you can definitely get stable footage at 180 if you're filming or anything like that. But I did notice when I owned the 70 to 200 G Master, you have to look way back at that video when I bought that. It was a pretty funny story. But I definitely noticed a difference in terms of stabilization with the G Master having OSS and you know, adding that together with the sensor stabilization. So something to note there also, it doesn't have stabilization built into the lens. And that's pretty much it in terms of stuff that I'm not a fan of. Everything else is really fantastic. So carrying on with build quality, just talking about a couple more points there. It is built really nice. It's just like you would expect if you've seen any other Tamron FE mount lenses. It feels as if it's high quality, not as good quality as the G Master lenses. But it is built well. The zoom ring is really nice and smooth. It has a lock function so you can lock it off. It's not going to droop down in your bag. Sounds a bit rude. And the focus ring is really nice and smooth. The lens hood does fold back around like normal, and when it is folded around, it's still a large lens compared to something like my 24mm G Master, if you can see them side by side there. But it's not a big lens overall, and it makes it much easier to get it into your backpack or something like that. I can get this into my backpack really easily compared to the 70-200 G Master. You kind of have to have a whole space top to bottom free in your backpack, depending on what you have. Obviously some people have larger backpacks, but build quality, I feel like it's really good. I'm just missing those function buttons and AF/MF switches like we've talked about before. The 67mm filter thread on the front is really nice. All the other Tamron lenses have that, so you don't have to be buying lots of different filters and stuff if you have other different size lenses. In terms of weight, it's like half the weight of the Sony lens, and it's so obvious when you're holding it. This one, you can easily hang it, like I'd be comfortable hanging it from the camera body on my dual strap without worrying about bending the mount or anything like that. Some people will probably disagree with me, but you know, I think it's fine. The G Master, you'd never want to do that. You've got to have it linked on the mount on the lens itself. So yeah, size and weight are definitely a massive plus for this lens. 70 to 200 lenses in general aren't something I use. I only bought that G Master one because I got a really good deal on it. But if you need a lens like this and you want something for like sports or events or something like that, it's going to be really good. And I really don't think you're going to miss that 20mm. You know, from 200 over 180mm, I don't think you're going to miss that 20mm that much, especially if you're on a camera like the A7R III or A7R IV. You're going to be able to crop in heaps. Honestly, even on an A9 or an A7III, you're still going to be able to crop in and get that 200mm, you know, easily and not affect image quality too much. That's something else I want to touch on before I forget. I do have some inks for my printer, and I'm going to do some side-by-side printing in A3 with my A7R III in crop mode and in full frame mode, just so you can see how it actually looks in print. I think that's going to make a really interesting video. Now moving on to focus, the Tamron focus is really fantastic. It's really fast in terms of photo focus. It has a smooth transition when you're talking about going from one spot to the other in video. And it's really quiet, so it performs really well in video, and I'm really happy about that. It's a great performer. I do want to touch on something that has been talked about a little bit with the Sony 70 to 200. A lot of people have said they've had back focusing issues. With my copy, I bought it secondhand, and so I don't know the past history of it, but I didn't have that issue at all. I know Manny Ortiz said he had that issue, and I totally believe him. I've had a friend that had the issue. So, you know, I know it's a known issue. I don't know why. I guess it's just bad construction or something like that coming out of the Sony factory. It's definitely not ideal. I'm not defending Sony. It's definitely a rubbish issue to have with a lens that's so expensive like that. And I only have one copy of the Tamron, so all I can say is this one doesn't back focus. It nails it every time. Really nice lens in terms of focus performance. The other thing in terms of focus I wanted to touch on really quickly is the close focus distance is really fantastic. So you can almost use it as a macro lens. I took a couple of shots with it, one at 70mm and one at 180. At 70mm, the closest focus distance is ridiculous, and even at 180, you can get really close up with it. So if you want to get some detail shots or something, the close focus distance with this lens is really fantastic. So next, talking about image quality, it's really amazing. Honestly, it's really sharp. I think the G Master is probably just a slight edge better, but I'll go into that more in my comparison. You know, but I think this is like 90% as good as the Sony G Master. And chromatic aberration on this one is amazingly well controlled. It's really hard to get any aberration coming up or anything. In terms of flaring, it's really well controlled also. And when you're talking about background blur, I think the Sony definitely has a smoother background because of that 11 aperture blade design, where the Tamron only has the standard 9 blades like most other lenses. I'll upload some raw files so you guys can have a play with them for yourself also. But should you buy the Sony 70 to 200 over the Tamron 70 to 180? It's really hard for me to recommend that. Honestly, in most situations, I would just go ahead and buy the Tamron. It's a really fantastic lens. We do have the Sigma coming out soon, so whether you want to wait for that or not, that's obviously going to be bigger and heavier. They always are than the Tamron lenses, but it will have the function buttons and stuff like that on it. The only other thing with the Sigma lenses that I'm not a fan of, especially with the zoom lenses, really only with the zoom lenses, is the zoom ring's opposite to what it is on the Sony lenses. So that can be a little bit of a hassle. If you're using like a 24-70 and a 70 to 200 on the other one, and one zooms backwards to the other one, that's going to be a little bit annoying for you. So that's it on the 70-180 Tamron, guys. Thanks for watching. I just hit 20,000 subscribers, so really grateful to all you guys following along and giving me support over the last 2 years since I started this channel. I'll see you in the next video in a couple of days.